Good afternoon, everybody. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Christian Dreshaj, and my group members are Amira Pula, Adrian Podrima, Eblen Bordanici, Erklin Suicide, and Erza Kastrati. Today we are going to talk about the Great Depression. So I'll start to talk first with a short introduction, and then my friends will continue with a broad explanation in order to make it more and more understandable for all of you. So the Great Depression was the deepest and the longest economic downturn in the Western industrialized world. In the United States, the Great Depression began soon after the stock market crash on October 1929, which sent the Wall Street into a panic and wiped out 1 million of investors. Over the next several years, consumer spending and investors dropped, causing deep declines in industrial output and raising level of unemployment as failing companies laid off workers. So by 1933, when the Great Depression reached its lowest point, around 13 to 15 million Americans were unemployed. And nearly the half of the country's banks has failed. So this was a short introduction for me on Great Depression, and now my friend Anita Pula will continue on causes of Great Depression. Thank you.
Before continuing to tell the causes of Great Depression, I'm going to talk about the roaring of the 1920s. 1920s were the age of dramatic social and political change. For the first time, more Americans were living in the cities than in farms. The national total wealth doubled between 1920s and 1929, and this economic growth swept many Americans into a familiar consumer society. People from coast to coast start listening to the same music, start wearing the same clothes, and even some start using the world's slang. Many Americans were uncomfortable with this new urban, sometimes racy mass culture, but this also in 1920s brought more conflict than celebration. Now I'm going to talk about the causes of Great Depression from the year of 1920 until 1929. Stock market crash of 1929. Many believe that the stock market crash that occurred on Black Tuesday, October 29th, is one of the same with the Great Depression, but that's not true, because the stock market crash is one of the main reasons why it happened, the Great Depression. 2 months after the original crash in October, stockholders had lost more than $40 billion. But that by the end of 1930, it was not enough, and Americans truly entered what is called the Great Depression. Another point of the causes of the Great Depression is the bank failure. Through the 1930s, more than 9,000 banks failed, and bank deposit was not covered, and banks failed, so people lost their savings. By surviving, banks assured of the economic situation and concerns for their own survival, stopped being as willing to create new loans. So this increased the violence in the situation, leading to less and less expenditures. Another point is reducing gun purchasing across the border. With the stock market crash and the fear of further economic depression, individuals from all classes stopped purchasing items. This led to the number of items pursued and thus a reduction in the workforce. As people lost their job, they start spending less. By spending less, then there was another economic depression. So there was even less spending to help to reduce the economic situation. Another point is American economic policy with Europe. As businesses start falling, Americans created a tariff that it was called Smooth-Howell tariff in 1930s to help protect American companies. This charged a high tariff on the imports that came from other places, but this tariff consequences both to occur between Americans and foreign countries. So a lot of foreign countries start reacting automatically against the US. One of the main reasons, even though it's not really one of the biggest problems that led to the causes of Great Depression, is the dry condition. This occurs in the Mississippi Valley in 1930s. That was as of such proportion that many could not even pay their taxes on other debts, and they had to sell their farms without even to profit themselves. Now, and then we're going to continue on micro and macro.
Thank you, Anita. I'm going to describe Great Depression in a different perspective. In different ways, both Keynesian and Friedman explain that the Great Depression caused in the 1930s was because of the tragic disconnection between economic as a whole, the needs of economic as a whole, and the decisions made by individuals in order to struggle to survive in that Great Depression. So when a farmer, I want to take some examples. When a farmer produces a lot of wheat and he starts to sell less and less. In order to gain the profit that he lost, he produces more. But when there is a lot of supply, can somebody please tell me what happens to the price? It goes down. When we have a lot of supply, it goes down. Thank you very much. And when the price goes down and there's a lot of supply, can somebody tell me please what happens when to the do we have a surplus or do we have a shortage? So we have a surplus, and the factory cannot sell the whole of this production. So in order to gain the most benefit, the factory has to lay off some workers, and when they lay off some of the workers, then we have the unemployment increases. And when the unemployment increases, we have more poverty comes, and we have more poverty. So when the workers fear that they're going to lose their work, and can somebody please tell me what will their rational decision will be with their savings? Will they spend more money or save more? So they will spend less. Exactly. When they spend less, then they're going to buy less production, so the factories will sell even less and less more. So we'll lose a lot of more money. But when people start to save more, so there will be less savings in the depositors. So they try to, when the depositors are less depositors, then the banks will go to failings. But when a person sees this, then he will go and take all of his cash from the bank, and then the bank will have no more loans to give. So the banks will go into failing. So all of the people do the same thing, and we have a failing system of the bank. According to this and the American ideology that individual success depends on the hard work, prudence, and industriousness of the individual, during the Great Depressions it proved the opposite. Because of the hard work, prudence, and industriousness, each of individual Americans tended to make overall problems of the national economy even worse. Because America during the Great Depression became a perfect example of a vicious spiral in which the perfectly rational microeconomic decisions of millions of individuals combined to all together, it resulted to a macroeconomic problems of the system as a whole. Thank you very much. Now, Albion will continue.
In the years of 1929 and 1932, worldwide GDP fell for 15%. After the stock market crash, businesses started to close or to lay off workers. Now families did not have money to buy things, so demand for manufactured goods fell. Now fewer families were acquiring new cars for household appliances. They couldn't buy clothes and couldn't afford paying rent. Young men left home seeking for jobs. Some farm families began burning corn rather than coal because of the cheaper price of corn. So the countryside smelled like popcorn at times. By 1932, 3 years after the initial crash, near 30 million Americans had lost their source of income from unemployment or loss of family breadwinner. Of those that had consistent work, more than half were reduced to part-time schedules. However, with the coming of World War II, governments began hiring many men to serve in the army. Factories began receiving orders for military supplies. The resulting decreased demand led to lower prices as producers and retailers tried to sell their products at the cheapest price in the competition, which caused deflation. Consumer prices fell for a quarter by 1933. In the U.S., throughout such hardships, a program called the New Deal was enacted in the years 1933 to 1938. That meant the government intervened in people's life through securing of employment aid and social insurances. In France, conditions worsened in 1931. Unemployment rose and hours of work were cut. However, the price of food sharply declined, which lightened the crisis slightly. Paris was confronted with demonstrations between communists, extreme leftists and rightists. In Germany, the depression had reached its worst in 1932 with 6 million unemployed people. Berlin burst on political chaos as communist and Nazi military forces fought for control of the streets. Meanwhile, in Great Britain, world trade fell by half in the years of 29 to 33. The output of heavy industry fell by a third. Employment profits fell quickly in all sectors. City leaders fought back, promoted a series of reforms and innovations in the infrastructure that made them leaders in the new urban redevelopment. Now we will continue. Yeah.
Thank you, everybody. As you can see, social and cultural effects in the U.S. and worldwide were great. Just as by reading the topic, we got depressed ourselves. During this time, mass migration was huge. The people from, just in U.S., the people from New York and the New England states were moving, the new generation were moving, going to California and Arizona, because during this time Arizona and California was better promising because of the gold, because of the huge water supplies, which was a promising land for the new generation to go and work as a farmers. Crime rate increased rapidly. Many husbands and fathers became thieves in order to put something in the table for their family. Prostitution was another problem which had caused from Great Depression. Many women seeking desperately to pay their bills had to work illegally in order to make money to pay these bills. Alcoholism was another thing that the United States was faced during this time. Many people who couldn't face their reality were seeking for another reality by drinking and not thinking what is really happening in their life. Higher education during this time, many youngsters couldn't afford going to college since the college was really expensive, and the number of people enrolling in high schools increased rapidly because they knew that even if they finish high school, they cannot afford to go to college, and they choose to stay more and more in high school. But because of the government, they decided to pay less in the high schools and invest their money somewhere else. They were faced with many schools being closed down and many professors and many schools working with understaffed numbers. Another question is how did Great Depression end? This Great Depression, it seems that it's never going to end. But in Great Britain, where the recovery was much faster than in many countries. They started recovering their economy right after 1931 when they decided to remove themselves from the gold standard and to create their own value without being interrupted by the how much gold they have in their treasury. Germany also started to increase their economy during 1931 to 1933. Canada and other small European countries started their increase in the economy during the 1930s too. But when the recovery began, it started in 1939, 1940, when the countries of European Union, not European Union during the time, but of Europe and Canada, Australia were preparing for the World War II when they started their economy of war. U.S. had a higher increase in the economy during the 1930s because of the plan of Franklin D. Roosevelt, his New Deal. He decided to invest more in the national parks in order to put more people in the job. During this time, most of the national parks in which the United States has right now are created during Franklin D. Roosevelt period. And also the highways were another sector in which Franklin D. Roosevelt invested. Now, another colleague of mine is going to give a quick conclusion. We have another video to show to you for economic impact.
In many ways, the Great Depression made this country what it became.
This kind of fear or concern that, gee, everything's going well, but everything could fall apart.
It has been difficult for subsequent generations to really imagine just how awful and how deep and how long it was.
You know, the Great Depression was so interesting because America had been on such a high for so long, and just, you know, the jazz age and everything was great and everybody was having a lot of fun, and all of a sudden it came crashing down. And I think that folks just sort of thought, is this the end of the American dream?
Now, one might have said, looking around the United States in the 1930s, at the worst moment, there were 13 million people unemployed.
You had people in soup kitchens, you had people unemployed, people were losing their homes across the country. The whole nation came to a standstill. And everybody looking at America thought, was it all a mockery? Was it all just an experiment that obviously didn't work? And what will America be now? Will they just be a marginal nation? Will they ever recover from this?
The collapse of the infrastructure of a country that had really, up until that point, had been based on a sense of surplus, you know, a sense of there being plenty for everyone, must have instilled in people a real calling to redefine who we were going to be in our history, who we were going to be in the progress of this country.
America was made up, again, of immigrants, of people who come from other forms of deprivation. They came here to have a better life, and they had worked hard to get to where they were, and then it began to be cut away from them. And they didn't turn and run because they'd known a hard time earlier.
I can assure you that it is safer for you to keep your money in a reopened bank than to keep it under the mattress.
And we had a president, Franklin Roosevelt, who came in and served 4 terms during the Great Depression, who also led us through World War II, who took demonstrative action to try to turn the country around.
That's what we know as the New Deal, which at the end of the day was nothing more nor less than creating a set of institutions that were commensurate with the scale and complexity of the economy as it had evolved up to that time. What the Great Depression revealed, and certainly what I think Franklin Roosevelt thought it revealed, were these deep structural deficits in American society and the economy that have been allowed to go unattended for about 100 years, since the Industrial Revolution first shows up or arrives and impacts America in the very early 19th century.
Families across America learn the real meaning of deprivation and sacrifice and community effort.
The American people showed great resiliency and great determination, and they drew an optimism out of the most pessimistic circumstances you could possibly have. And whether it was still that pioneer spirit that resided in many of the people, that hope for the future, that it's bad now, but if I keep working, keep plugging away, it's going to get better.
I absolutely think that the spirit that got us through the Depression came from that same pioneer spirit. It was the idea that, look, something's going to knock you down, but you can't stay down. You got to get back up and plow on. You can't sit around feeling sorry for yourself. You certainly can't look back and reminisce about the good old times. You just got to keep on going forward and reinvent things.
During this time, American dream seems to be lost and vanished, but President Franklin D. Roosevelt and his wife Eleanor Roosevelt seemed that they gave a new meaning to American dream. They thought that everybody should have the opportunity to have a work and a job. So now, Erza is going to give a quick conclusion and summarize almost all of them. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Glenn. Economists may dream of a perfect market where no bubbles, crashes, or recessions occur. But when it comes to players such as humans, these things are unavoidable. The Great Depression serves as a perfect example to show us how vulnerable markets can be. The timing and severity of the Great Depression varied substantially among countries. Countries such as the United States and Canada, United States and Europe. In these countries, the Great Depression was longer, and in Japan and much of Latin America, the depression was shorter. The worst depression ever experienced by the world economy slowed from a multitude of causes. A decline in consumer demand, financial panics, and misguided government policies caused economic output to fall in the United States. The economic impact of the Great Depression was enormous, including both human suffering and profound changes in economic policy. Yet the chaos in the 1930s turned out to be conservative for the American people. The Great Depression taught people of all social classes that it's better to survive than to take risks and cause someone's life or money. Moreover, faced with totalitarian ideologies in Europe and Japan, Americans rediscovered the virtues of democracy. The Great Depression also changed economic thinking, because many economists and others believe that the Great Depression was caused by inadequate demand. The Keynesian view that the government should and could stabilize the demand in order to prevent future depressions. This view became the dominant view for the economics profession for the next 40 years. Although an increasing number of economists have come to doubt this view, the general public still accepts it. Remarkably, given the importance of the Great Depression in the development of economic policy and economic thinking, economists do not completely agree on what caused it. Recent research has led to an emerging consensus on why the contraction began in the 1928 and the 1929. There is less agreement on why the contraction phase was longer in some countries and why it was shorter in some countries. The United States and Europe serves as a perfect example of how long the Great Depression lasts. This was our presentation.
Now I may take any question you may have.